When I was 17, my best friend Aaron dared me to explore the abandoned Whitaker house at the far end of Maple Hollow Road. If you've never heard of it, the Whitaker house was one of those places everyone in town pretended not to talk about, but secretly had a story for. You could mention it in the diner and watch people shift uncomfortably in their seats. Some said an entire family vanished there in the 60s. Others claimed it was never a house at all, but something built over bad ground, cursed land where nothing living should stay too long. As kids, we'd ride past it on our bikes just to prove we weren't scared, but even then, no one stopped. The building leaned to one side like it was tired of existing, its roof curling at the edges, its porch sagging dangerously. Tall weeds climbed halfway up the windows, and every year someone from the county would nail up new boards to cover the doors, and every year someone would pry them loose. Aaron grinned when he suggested it, as if he had been waiting for this moment. 10 minutes inside and I'll buy you lunch for a week, he said. I didn't believe in ghosts. I thought the stories were nothing but small-town folklore. So with the overconfidence only a teenager can have, I said, "Fine, let's do it." We got there just as the sun was dipping low, casting a strange burnt orange glow through the clouds. The air felt different on that property, heavier, stiller. I found a loose panel around the back and squeezed through while Aaron stayed outside, leaning against his bike, phone in hand, ready to record my bravery. The moment I stepped inside, something shifted. The air was warm, but felt dead. No wind, no distant sounds of cars from the highway. Not even the crickets that had been chirping a moment earlier. The living room looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Broken chairs, faded wallpaper curling at the edges. A coffee table with a thick coat of dust, except for one spot where the dust had been wiped away, like something had been sitting there recently. I tried to call out to Aaron, but my voice felt swallowed by the walls. No echo. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, but it seemed dimmer somehow, like the shadows themselves were swallowing the light. I walked down a narrow hallway, passing a doorway to what I guessed was the dining room. That's when my breath caught in my throat. The table was set, not just with dishes and utensils, but set. Plates lined with cracked china, tall glasses with faded watermarks, a rusted candelabra in the center with wax frozen in mid-drip. Everything was coated in dust except the chairs. Their seats were clean, as if someone had just been sitting there. And then I heard it, a whisper right behind my ear. "Don't go in that house." I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the flashlight. Nothing. The hallway was empty. At first I told myself it was Aaron trying to scare me from outside, but the voice had been too close, too intimate, and it didn't sound like him. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I crept toward a partially open door at the end of the hall. A cold draft rolled out from the gap. When I pushed it open, it revealed a steep staircase leading down into a basement. My gut screamed, "Don't go," but I forced myself to step closer. That's when the voice came again, louder, sharper. "Turn around." I froze. Above me on the second floor came the sound of heavy footsteps, not slow, creaky old house noises, but deliberate, measured, someone walking across the floor directly above my head. I backed away from the basement door, turning to find the exit, but as I walked, the hallway changed. I'm not exaggerating. Doors I didn't remember passing before lined the walls. The wallpaper patterns shifted. When I finally stumbled into the dining room again, I nearly dropped the flashlight. The table was no longer dusty. The plates were full. Steam rose from them as if the food had been cooked minutes ago. Glasses filled to the brim. Chairs pulled out neatly, waiting for guests. And then the guests appeared. One by one, figures faded into view seated at the table, skin pale and stretched thin, their eyes empty and glassy. None of them blinked. None of them moved. Until one did. The man at the head of the table slowly turned his head toward me, his jaw unhinged far too wide for a human, and in a guttural, broken whisper he said, "You were warned." My flashlight died. Total darkness. I ran, blindly, crashing into walls, kicking open a door that I didn't remember passing. Somehow, I spilled out into the cold night air, collapsing onto the grass. Aaron rushed over, his phone still in hand. "Dude, what happened? You went in and came right back out," he said. I stared at him, panting, my chest tight. "What time is it?" He checked his phone. 6:42, you've been gone, maybe a minute. I pulled out my own phone, 7:53 p.m. We never spoke about it again. A week later, the Whitaker house was torn down without warning. No construction crews, no debris, just gone. But when I drive past the empty lot at night, I swear I still hear that whisper in my head. You were warned. I was driving through the mountains late one evening, the kind of night where the darkness feels heavier than usual, as if the air itself is pressing in around you. My trip had run later than expected, and by the time I left my friend's cabin, the sun had already disappeared behind the jagged peaks. The road was quiet. No cars ahead, none behind. Just the crunch of my tires against the rough asphalt and the occasional flicker of my headlights catching an animal's reflective eyes deep in the tree line. I passed through a small, nearly abandoned village, only 3 or 4 houses, all with boarded windows and peeling paint. Most of the streetlights were broken, their poles leaning at odd angles. It was the kind of place you pass through without stopping. That's when I saw it. An old, rusted road sign stood crooked at the edge of the highway. Its paint was flaking, the metal bent, but the words were still visible under the faint glow of my headlights. Do not drive past this point after dark. I slowed down, the tires crunching against loose gravel. The sign looked ancient, like something from decades ago. I glanced around, expecting maybe a road closure or construction equipment, but there was nothing, just an empty stretch of highway winding into the blackness. My GPS showed the route continuing straight, no warnings, no alternate roads. I figured it was some outdated remnant from an old road hazard, maybe a landslide years back. So, like an idiot, I ignored it. The moment I crossed that invisible line, something changed. The air grew colder, but it wasn't the crisp chill of mountain air. It was damp and heavy, like walking into a basement that hasn't seen sunlight in years. The pine trees seemed to grow denser, their branches reaching over the road until they formed a canopy that blocked out even the faint glow of the moon. The silence was unnatural. No chirping crickets, no rustling leaves, just my engine and the hum of my tires. Then movement. At the far edge of my headlights, I saw a figure walking along the shoulder. I eased off the gas. Maybe a lost hiker. As I got closer, my stomach twisted. His clothes were wrong. An old, moth-eaten suit, the kind you'd see in black and white photographs. But what froze me wasn't the clothes. It was his face. Or rather, the lack of one. His skin was perfectly smooth, stretched over where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. I didn't think, I just slammed the accelerator, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. As I sped past, my mirrors caught something impossible. The faceless man had turned toward me. Even without features, I knew. He was watching. The road began to twist more sharply, curves that didn't match my GPS. My phone lost all signal, and then the screen of my GPS went black entirely. I was alone in a tunnel of trees, with no end in sight. When I finally spotted a break in the darkness ahead, I felt a flicker of hope. until I realized what I was seeing. It was the same road sign, the same rust, the same bent frame. "Do not drive past this point after dark." My heart dropped. I had been driving in one direction the whole time. There was no possible way I could loop back to where I started, unless I wasn't driving in a straight line anymore. That's when they appeared. Two bright lights in my rearview mirror, gaining on me fast. At first I thought it was a car, but the lights were too high, floating several feet above the ground. They moved with unnatural smoothness, weaving through the trees as if the road didn't exist. I pushed the pedal to the floor, the engine groaning in protest. The lights stayed with me, always just far enough back that I couldn't make out what they belonged to. Then, without warning, they were gone. I don't remember how I got home. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was parked in my driveway, my car still running, keys in the ignition. My phone was back in my lap, with 67 missed calls from my family, all between midnight and 3 a.m. They swore they had been trying to reach me since I left my friend's cabin. But when I checked the drive time on my GPS history, there was nothing. No record of the route. A week later, I went back during daylight, determined to prove to myself it was all just exhaustion and paranoia. I drove the exact same road. There was no village, no boarded houses, no sign. But as I passed a curve deep in the forest, I noticed a patch of freshly turned earth by the roadside. Half buried in the dirt was a twisted piece of metal, bent, rusted, and faintly stamped with the outline of a warning. And I swear just before I drove away, I saw two pale lights in the shadows of the trees, watching. It started as one of those weekends you remember for years. At least that's what we thought. 6 friends, all in our early 20s, looking to escape the grind of work and college. We wanted a couple of days in the wilderness, just us, nature, a crackling campfire, and no phone reception to remind us of the outside world. We found a spot deep in the forest, the kind of place you only find if you know someone who's been there before. It was Ryan's idea. His uncle used to camp here when he was young, and he swore it was the perfect place to get away. We parked our cars near an old dirt trail and hiked for nearly an hour, backpacks digging into our shoulders, until we reached a clearing right next to a silent, dark lake. It was beautiful, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a postcard. The water perfectly still, tall pines swaying gently in the breeze, the air crisp and clean. But there was also something too quiet about it. No bird song, no distant sound of insects, just the occasional ripple across the water. We set up camp as the sun began to drop behind the tree line. Tents pitched, firewood gathered, and soon the first flames were flickering against the growing shadows. The mood was light, music playing from someone's small speaker, beer bottles clinking, laughter echoing into the dark. That's when Ryan decided to bring up the dare. He claimed he'd read about it on some obscure forum the week before, a story about these very woods. According to the Post, there was a forbidden clearing somewhere nearby, a place locals refused to go after dark. The legend went that if you stood in the center of that clearing at exactly midnight and called out 3 times, "I'm here to see you," something would answer. The story didn't say what. We laughed at first. It sounded like something made up to scare kids. Mia, the sensible one, just rolled her eyes. "It's probably just a creepypasta someone made up to get clicks," she said, poking at the fire with a stick. But Ryan was persistent. "Come on," he grinned, leaning forward so the firelight lit up his face. "How often do you get a chance to test something like this? We're literally here." I told him it was a bad idea, not because I believed in the story, but because wandering around a forest at night is just asking for trouble. But after a couple more beers and a lot of teasing, my resolve slipped. "Fine," I said. "I'll go, but I'm not doing it alone." Ryan immediately volunteered, and after some hesitation, Mia agreed to join. Mostly, I think, to make sure we didn't do anything too stupid. At 11:45, the three of us set off with one flashlight between us. The rest of the group stayed behind, watching the glow from the campfire fade as we disappeared into the dark. The trail wound deeper into the forest, the trees pressing closer together until it felt like the night itself was swallowing us. Our footsteps crunched loudly against the silence. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. After about 15 minutes, the trees thinned, and we stepped into a clearing. It was strange, perfectly circular, the grass shorter than anywhere else, as though it had been trimmed. The trees surrounding it stood in unnaturally even intervals, like they'd been placed there deliberately. And the air felt wrong. I can't explain it, but the moment we entered, my ears popped, like the pressure in the air had shifted. Ryan gave me a smug look. "All right," he said, "let's do this." I swallowed, stepped into the middle, and called out, "I'm here to see you." Nothing. Again, louder. "I'm here to see you." Still nothing, just the pounding of my own heartbeat. One last time, I yelled it into the dark. "I'm here to see you." For a moment, there was silence. Then, somewhere beyond the tree line, a branch snapped. Mia grabbed my arm. "Let's go!" But Ryan raised the flashlight, pointing it toward the sound. "Who's there?" he called. That's when we saw it. A figure between the trees. Too tall to be human, its head nearly touching the lowest branches. The beam caught its face, or what should have been a face. It looked like pale bark stretched over bone, with two faintly glowing white eyes staring straight at us. It didn't move like a person. It swayed slightly as though the wind was pushing it, but there was no wind. Then it took a step forward. The three of us bolted. Branches clawed at our arms and faces, the flashlight beam jerking wildly. I could hear it behind us. Heavy, deliberate steps. Never running, but never slowing either. We burst back into camp, gasping, the others staring in confusion. "What happened?" one of them asked. We turned to point back into the forest, but the space where the trail was now seemed darker than the rest of the woods. No eyes, no movement, just stillness. Ryan laughed shakily, muttering about adrenaline and tricks of the light, but I noticed he didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. The next morning, as we packed up, I glanced toward the tree line one last time. The trees looked closer, and just for a second I thought I saw two faint lights watching from between them. We never spoke about the clearing again. None of us have gone camping since. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.